Ryan Stevens here with NREP, the National Real Estate Post. I have Clayton Collins, the CEO of Housingwire. By the way, I'm going to tell you this. I've been going to Housingwire almost every day for I can't even tell you how many years. It's my go-to. It really honestly is. How's everything going, man?
Going great. Hopefully it's been 12 years. We're 12 years old now. I can't believe it.
It's got to be right around there. You know, me and Frank got into Think Big, Work Small about 12 years ago, and I'll bet you we found you right around the same time. It was the active rain days. All of these groups came about at the same time. So listen, 12 years ago, that means you came in right around the last once-in-a-lifetime meltdown. And here we are just 12 years later in our next once-in-a-lifetime meltdown. In 2008, it took 15 months for everything to fall apart. This time it fell apart in 3 weeks. We have a different way of approaching the problems that we had in 2008. In 2008, we were dealing with billions. Now we're dealing with trillions. We've seen a lot of moves that really collapsed a lot of parts of this industry in a very short period of time. Our non-QM went away. Our jumbos became very difficult. Our underwriting tightened up. Our product availability literally overnight. How do you see the health of the organization or the industry right now?
Yeah, I think the terminology of meltdown is actually pretty opposite from the world we are right now, where it feels like a melt up. Economic pressure has put pressure on interest rates, has put us in a scenario where the housing industry is excelling. And right now we're looking at refi forecasts that put us at a 17-year high for 2020, at the same time as seeing incredible purchase demand. And the numbers we're seeing this week are purchase demand 25% higher than prior year for that first week of June. So I don't think anybody, or I certainly did not anticipate 90 days ago that coming into June, we'd be talking about a scenario where we're not revising down our 2020 forecast, we're revising them up because the interest rate environment, pent-up consumer demand, and really strong demographics keep pushing this housing market forward.
Yeah, in 2008, the mortgage industry was essentially blamed for the meltdown. And right now we can really be the solution. It's an entirely different, it's entirely different dynamics from where we were before. We still do have some struggles in front of us. Non-QM fell apart. Our jumbo market kind of fell apart. It's starting to come back on track. Are you surprised at how quickly things seem to be coming back?
I guess I'm surprised. What I'm most surprised by is consumer demand. So I'm not surprised that low interest rates are fueling interest, but I'm surprised at how quick consumers, home buyers have bounced back into the purchase market. I think that's the biggest surprise for me. We did see kind of coming into this, we heard it from Dave Stevens, we heard it from Barry Habib, that the housing industry could be a bellwether that helps bring the economy out of a recession, not something that drags us into a recession. But I think the biggest surprise is how quickly that has happened. And here we are, less than 90 days from when we all went into shelter in place and sent our teams home from the office. And we're seeing consumers out in droves looking for homes. And I think that's the biggest surprise for me. It's just how quickly confidence has come back in the housing market.
First of all, they're talking about, a second spike, another wave because of all the close proximity of people. I just saw a study that said 30% of folks are not making their house or rent payments right now. Different demographics in different areas, but I think it averages out to 30%. Are you fairly confident that this wave of enthusiasm that we have in the housing market right now is sustainable?
We have a lot of uncertainty. Like, we don't know how serious, and I think it's even hard to call this a second wave. It's a continuation of the first wave for many parts of the country. And that's going to drive uncertainty. And it depends on how quickly jobs come back and how quickly the service sector and retail sector kind of turn back on in terms of employment. But one of the things that we've learned, and has become more common belief throughout the last 75 days, is that home has never been more important. And whether you're shelter in place or you're working from home or you're homeschooling your kids, everything right now is about home. Now I understand that home requires employment. home requires a paycheck. Like, it doesn't matter how much you want that extra office or how much you need the yard. If you don't have a job, that may not be an option. But one thing you're seeing right now across the country is that people realizing the value of home, realizing their personal and family priorities, and reevaluating their values on where they allocate their discretionary or housing related share of wallet. And that's one thing that I think is really significantly different from what we saw in 2008, where housing was not just, we're not talking about throwing the housing industry on the bus or banking industry under the bus. We're talking about housing was seen as a burden for many people. Houses were underwater. Renting seemed like a really attractive option at the time. And right now we have this mindset shift where housing, your primary home, is not seen as a burden. It's seen as a safe haven. And that's supported by what we're seeing in home prices and what we're seeing and how quickly the real estate purchase market has turned back around in most of the country. So talk about housing prices. So nationally, on a national level, we're up 3.1% year over year. That's not typically what you see in the first quarter of a recession, or at least what anybody anticipated seeing after the last recession we went through. And that confidence that comes with seeing home prices continue to appreciate, which you and I understand, Brian, is supported by this lack of demand right now, gives a degree of consumer confidence in the fact that they're not putting yourselves into underwater scenarios or ruining your personal balance sheet by investing in this safe haven that is home.
I love what you said there, because I that really brings clarity to this issue. I've been mulling this over. In fact, we were talking about it before we lit this whole thing up. You know, people are sitting at their houses right now, and they're doing projects like they've never done before, and they're really looking at their house. And I think that's what I was trying to say, is their house really has become a safe haven. Before this COVID thing, we were so upwardly mobile. We wake up in the morning, we leave our house at dawn, we come back at dusk, and we kind of, wash, rinse, repeat that groundhog moment. Now that we're kind of stuck at our houses and we're seeing that as a safe area, I think what I heard you say is where we would otherwise spend our discretionary funds outside of the home, we're now turning and spending a lot of that discretionary money and we're putting it back into our houses. And it's making people rethink what a house means to them. And we've seen this over the past 3 years. Manhattan has seen their population figures go down. People are moving out of Manhattan. They don't want to live in this dense, congested area. And the COVID issue that we're dealing with is exacerbating that. We see the same thing with people moving out of California and more people working at home. The only thing that this COVID thing is going to do is it's going to put more people in their houses working permanently, where they had kind of, the job that they had to travel to. So I absolutely agree with that. In fact, I think what you're finding is a lot of real estate agents, what I think you should be doing is you should be finding some real estate agents who are servicing urban areas and find friendships over there so you can get referral fees, because a lot of people are starting to move out towards the burbs right now. Just kind of off the wall here, but how is this affecting millennials? Everyone's always talking about the millennials, how they don't want to buy right now. Is this going to change the trajectory of millennials purchasing homes?
My favorite term of this 90-day decade we're living in right now, it feels like 10 years, but it's really only been 90 days, is the great acceleration. And I initially started using and hearing that term in reference to technology. So you see it across all of consumer and business behavior. People are accelerating their progress into e-commerce. People that never thought they'd have their groceries delivered now can't imagine a life without their groceries being delivered. And that also comes to business and B2Bs, like the mortgage and real estate world. Lenders who wanted to talk about adopting digital mortgage platforms and talk about an e-close and e-notary now need it. And so you saw this acceleration of all these things and concepts and nice to haves that the industry has been pontificating around getting pulled forward or accelerated into reality. I think that same thing, that same concept applies in demographics. So we saw for the last 20 or 30 years, the average age of household formation and the average age of the first home purchase kept getting pushed back. And I believe coming into March, we're like at 33.1 or something, like years old before somebody bought their first home as a national average. And we quickly started to see, now short, small sample size here, but in the first 45 days of COVID-19, we saw that upwardly trending age start to reverse course. And it saw people in their 20s and earlier in their 30s start to buy homes. And I think a lot of that is based around the perceived value and actual value of renting. And a big reason you rent, a reason I rented before kids and dogs and cats came into the picture was amenities. I wanted to live close to restaurants I could walk to. I wanted a gym in my building. I wanted the business center. I wanted friends I could go knock on their door. COVID-19, all of those things disappeared. The restaurant down the street wasn't open. The gym was closed. The business center was closed. You shouldn't go knock on your friend's door. So all of those things that younger, we'll call them millennials, whatever you want to call them, people in their 20s and 30s valued, or even later in life, that people who chose to rent because of that metropolitan lifestyle, a lot of those values evaporated. So you start to think, well, if I can't have the gym on the first floor that I can take the elevator down to and get a quick workout in, what am I going to do? Would I rather live in a single family house where I can like go do a jog around the neighborhood and do a socially distanced workout and stay healthy? Or I can't walk to the restaurant down the street anymore. I need a bigger backyard so I can grill out. And you start to do trade-offs in what you value as a homeowner. And that's one of the things we're watching closely as we look at kind of demographic preferences and homeownership trends that really could further accelerate this great acceleration.
Yeah, I think that's true. And, I think a lot of the unrest that are going on in our urban areas right now, they're pushing people out to the burbs as well. It's kind of the 1-2 punch. I just read the other day that 20% of all listings in the Minneapolis area happened after the protests on the first night. A lot of people are saying, I don't want to be around or a part of any of this stuff, one way or another. And so I think not only is it going to be the COVID thing, but I think the unrest that we're finding in a lot of areas right now, people just want to get away from it.
There's a few waves on that though. So like the last week of May, national listing volume or available home inventory was 22% lower than prior year. First week of June, it was 15% lower. So houses on market are moving faster. So it makes sense that a lot of the listings in Minneapolis came on market after the protest began, because the listings that were on previously already moved. National inventory right now is less than 3 months. So listings are moving quickly elsewhere. I think it's kind of tempting to write off cities and say that like life in New York and life in San Francisco are over because they seem unappealing right now. But I think history will repeat itself, and we'll see a cycle where there's a segment of the population who decides to jump ship and go live the suburban lifestyle. But we're still going to see that next generation of recent college grads who want the metropolitan life and high achievers across a lot of different job categories who either have the financial capabilities or geographic necessity to be in those metropolitan areas. And we can say all day long that all the banks are going to send people out to their headquarters in Salt Lake City and Charlotte. And there's not going to be a downtown financial center anymore in Manhattan. But I think we're going to quickly see that there's going to be a trend there, but it's not going to be an overnight shift. And we very well could see that demographics over the next decade kind of shift back toward urban living, because that's just what history has done again and again and again.
Well, I agree with that. I think when you're looking at areas like San Francisco, Seattle, and Manhattan, nothing is in a vacuum. Yeah. And affordability is a huge issue. There's a lot of people who want that lifestyle and are just hanging on by a thread right now. And so it might be more appealing at this point to catch your breath, save a little money, and move out to the burbs. And you have these things that are taking place, the COVID-19s of the world right now, which are kind of pushing you out the door a little bit. But certainly, if we see anything that resembles affordability in any one of these big cities, they're going to stack up as quick as they get vacated. There's no doubt about that. It's too appealing to live in some of these big cities. I get that. Hey,
and we also, like, the big cities are also often populated by a good segment of high income and high wealth folks. And what we're seeing in New York right now is one of the largest segments of people, quote unquote, moving out of the city are not selling their city home. So it's people buying a second home or choosing to consider their previous New York City apartment now their weekend or pied à terre, which is a nice, that's a luxury class to be in, but it's actually something that is relatively prominent in Manhattan right now.
What is it? What do you have like Manhattan and San Francisco? You have two demographics. You have 10 people in one house, or one person with 10 houses. You're one of the other there.
Yeah, I haven't heard that kind of little analogy joke, but that's very good.
Kind of makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So if you're a LO right now, a lot of dynamics at play. I always say that it's the fog of war. I don't think it is as it was a couple of weeks ago. Things seem to be settling down a little bit more. What advice would you give to a loan officer as far as his approach to his marketing going forward? Is there anything that jumps out at you?
Yeah, I mean, I think the one thing that like keeps coming out across all marketing strategies is making sure that whatever you're doing, a voice of empathy and a humble nature is coming across in that messaging, whether it's on social or on purchase media campaigns. I think it's a lot of people are hitting annual records or lifetime records right now and having amazing years.
Yeah.
And it's empathy matters, because we know that there's this country, this market is pretty bifurcated. There's winners and losers. There's people who've been impacted really, really heavily by COVID-19 and civil unrest. And I think that's something that the whole housing industry has to understand is we can be the economic driver that helps pull our country out of a recession. Yep. But we have to be humble and empathetic in that process, because we know the calling of an LO, there got to be a calling, and that's putting people in homes. And it can't be too celebratory in that process, even though everyone's having a pretty good quarter, as it seems. The other side of that is information is critical. So Brian, one of the things you and I talked about earlier is that because of this bifurcated market, a lot of people believe that the economy and the housing market are directly correlated right now. They might believe they are underwater. They might believe their home value is down compared to what it was 4 months ago. That may be very true in parts of the country, but at a national level, it is not. So there's an education barrier that LOs and real estate agents have to help their clients through, because there's some massive opportunities right now for people to purchase the home that's right for their family and be that beacon of safety for what they need in their personal life right now. And there's also an opportunity for people who don't want to move to refinance and save money every single month in their personal P&L. And all that only comes with education, because I think there's all too many people across the country who associate economic turmoil and recession with housing crisis, because that is what we were conditioned to over the last 12 years ago.
Yeah, I love that message of empathy right now. It's, listen, reach out to your past clients, not necessarily for a sale, but, this is just a good time to see how people are doing. Some people are they're on shaky ground, they're nervous. And we could dispel some myths about what's going on with their biggest investment that they have right now. Sometimes people are just looking to hear from somebody else, a sympathetic ear. It's not a bad thing. It's not a bad time to reach out to folks, especially if they've been quarantined for the past 3.5 months. Let them know what's going on in the market. Find out where their loan is. Tell them everything's going to be okay. Or if you can position them in a better spot, if they're considering moving. I mean, this is a great time to reach out. I said this before, when I know people who commute from Sacramento to San Francisco. That's a 2-hour commute in either direction. And I think I can't fathom that. Imagine calling somebody after a 4-hour commute and an 8-hour workday. They don't want to talk to you. But right now, I think it's entirely human to reach out to folks just to see how they're doing. I think that's a really, really important thing to do, and leverage your knowledge set, your skill set about mortgages, about real estate, and see if you can, connect any dots or fill gaps for folks. It's just a good thing to do.
We hosted our third Engage Marketing Summit last week. This year was virtual, as we're not hopping on planes right now. And there's a lot of topics that came up in relation to messaging and marketing strategies, specifically for LOs and real estate agents who are trying to help people enter that purchase funnel. And one of the things that was very clear to me is everybody has their different like style and approach. And there's a lot of people who are a lot of LOs who are incredibly impactful on social media and can use sharing of content and messages, direct messages as ways to nurture and build relationships with people. But others that are just more impactful, picking up the phone. And I think right now, a lot of people's inboxes are full. Their social media notifications are on full alert. They don't want a text message when they get home from a 4-hour commute. But picking up a phone call, especially if you can time it during that commute when they actually might have an hour to burn, could be a really strategic process. So one of the things that I was like starting to walk into with Engage is that became very abundantly clear that every originator is going to have a little bit of different tactic, and
Sure.
recognizing what works best for you individually is really important, and not listening to the like, this is the one thing you have to do right now. No. There's one thing for you to do right now. And
Yep.
if you're in the Bay Area and you have that person that's commuting 2 hours each way, then thinking about how you connect with those people when it's convenient for them, not when they're trying to get the kids to bed and put dinner on the table, or right when they get to the office after a 2-hour commute. It's maybe it's a text or a phone call in those windows on each end. I don't know. But personal assessment, knowing what works for you, I think is critical right now.
Yeah, there is not a one size fit all. It's funny, doing like speaking and getting to see a lot of speakers around the country. You see people who do that. I always call it the magic pill. If you could just choke down this big old pill for $499 a month, you won't have to do any work and you'll be filthy rich. No, you're right. I think we do. I always say we have to read the tea leaves of the market. We have to think critically about what we're doing, and different market calls for different strategies, different forms of communication. Yeah. And finding what's comfortable for you. The whole marketing thing for me has always been, I think I heard Bill Hillestead say this one time. It goes, marketing can't be holding your breath underwater, because eventually you have to come up for air. If you do something that is just miserable for you, it's not sustainable. And yeah, looking at things strategically, finding a form of communication that's effective for you, and looking at your business critically is hugely, hugely important. Hey, listen, man, Clayton, this has been killer. I look forward to doing this on a much more regular basis. Again, Housingwire has been my go-to. If you've watched my show with any regularity, you probably see screenshots all over the place there. But no, you guys put out a great product, and I've been a fan of yours for a long time. So anybody who's watching this right now, if you want a great overview of what's going on in the mortgage industry, I mean, up to the latest of what's going on. And Housingwire oftentimes finds information about the industry that nobody else is covering. And that's critically important for us to know what's going on behind the scenes. And these guys do a great job with that. So Clayton, man, it was wonderful to talk with you.
We have it on our newsroom wall. News nowhere else. That's the North Star.
Yeah, it's true. Well, thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, Brian. Talk soon.
Bye-bye.